Well, what perfect timing. So I've waited 4 days for this. I had one on the first night down at Sandhurst here on a social with some lads from up north. First UK 40, and I managed to bag this one on a rig that I've been playing about with, all PB components, which I'll talk you through next. Right, so we've just put the fish back. 45.3 it went, still waiting to find out what fish it was. But just thought I'd talk you through the rig that I've had it on. I've been playing around with this rig for maybe 6 months now, since the new circle hooks come out from PB. Obviously all PB components, and I'll show you how I make it. So just a bit more about the rig mechanics and what products obviously I've been using. So starting from the swivel end, I'd probably fish this on a helicopter anyway, but this time, because it's quite soft, I've been using the hit and run leader systems. I use these pre-made because they're just miles easier, and obviously you get 3 in a pack, so you've got 3 rods ready to go. Then I'm moving on to PB's tail rubbers with a 35-pound jelly wire. I like the 35-pound because it's much more of a stiffer material, but it's still quite supple as it is, as you can see. Then I've got in the centre, I've got quite a bit of DT putty. I've got another piece of putty just before the shrink tube, obviously PB shrink tube, and then the new circle hooks what have come out. That's a size 4, and it sits perfectly with the wafters that I've been using. Right, so this is how I tie the rig. Strip off roughly 3 inches of the jelly wire and make a simple loop. So what I tend to do is double it over so that you can actually get the correct gauge from where it's stripped back to the actual bottom of the shrink tube, because under the shrink tube it's pretty stiff anyway, so you don't really get the flexibility that you do of uncoated braid. So all I do is pull it back to the desired length. So I know for a fact that once that loop's tied, I'm going to have exactly that much stripped back, which to me is just the perfect length to use. So all I'm going to do is a figure of 8 loop knot. This can be a bit finicky, but what you need to make sure is that your loop is big enough to go over the hook. So all I'm going to do is pull it down slowly and just adjust it properly, and then I know that's going to go over the hook and back round, and I'm not going to be stuck with a rig that I can't get over. And then all you do is pull it tight, snip off the tag ends. They don't have to be that neat because obviously you're going to put it under the shrink tubing anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. Wet the loop just so it threads through a little bit easier. Thread it through the eye of the hook, but you need to be going into the eye, not through the back. Thread on a bait screw, or you can use a swivel, it doesn't really matter. It all just depends on what bait you're actually going to be using. I like a wafter, so I think the speed of using a bait screw is much more usable within my fishing sort of thing. And that is what you're left with. So all I've got to do for that is take the length of the rig and put on the shrink tube. So I tend to cut off more than what I need, and then I've got roughly 3 to 4 centimeters of shrink tube, and all I'm going to do is thread that on, set the bait screw where you want it, and then just push it over the eye, and that's what you're left with before obviously it's melted down. It's kind of closer to a noodle rig than anything, this, but it's used in a slip D way, so obviously it's all going to pull through anyway, but that's roughly where I'd have the bait screw, just as it sits down, so it would essentially sit like that. All I'm going to do as I'm steaming it is I'm going to pull it onto an angle, so it creates sort of a bit of a curve, but it's more of a kink. Then if you just hold it and let it cool down a little bit. So then that's the rig steamed. All I've got to do now is add putty, get the correct length, stick it on, put a bait on and chuck it out. So once everything's steamed, it's all nice and ready. All I'm going to do is add a bit of putty, and I'm going to add that just to the end of where it's still coated. And all that enables me to do is have a little bit of flexibility within the rig. And then to finish it off, I normally put quite a bit of heavy putty down the centre of the rig. Due to it being critically balanced, once it drops in the water, that will always land first and then it will kick itself out. And like I said before, it should, once it's out there, sit just off the bottom and then slowly just start lying down over time. So just to touch on the hooks, and obviously it being critically balanced, if it does sit like that, obviously you're not going to have any problems with the point of the hook burring over or anything, because it is slightly inturned on the point. So I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it sitting up or burring over or anything like that, because it does slightly turn in, but then just as it goes in, obviously the mouth, that's how it's going to sit. And the hook holes that you get using this rig and these hooks is just unbelievable. So just to finish it off, all I do is figure of 8 loop knot at the desired length, pull it down tight, and all I'm going to do is thread on an anti-tangle sleeve, and that right there is the rig ready to go. So that's it with the bait on. That's the finished rig. I've been using DT baits, Crustacea wafters with good success recently as well. And I'll get it back out there and hopefully get another fish before we leave. We've done 5 nights now on Sandhurst. I've had 2 fish, but I've been sort of stuck in a bit of a corner. But yeah, what a venue.